Right, Motorcycle Live Event Week at the NEC in Birmingham. And today we're going to look at the Triumph stand, an extremely busy stand, which made photography of the bikes extremely difficult because there was barely a split second with any of the bikes where someone wasn't clambering all over them or standing around them pointing at things. But the way I saw it, they'd paid to get in, I'd got in on a press pass, so I just had to take my opportunities where I could. It is what it is. Now, as I've said, it was a very busy stand. Not necessarily the busiest at the show, but it did show a bit of a juxtaposition against what's happening with Triumph sales. Since 2017, Triumph has seen a global dip in bike sales, which they blame on the strength of the pound. Yet, and I think this has something to do with the dip in sales, year on year since 2017, they've seen a steady increase in profits. Now, the rather large Bonneville range has remained pretty much unchanged this year. The last new model added was the Speed Twin, and nothing new has been announced for 2020. So the stand floor was covered in bikes that we are all very familiar with the exception of a couple of special editions and a bike I wouldn't usually include on this channel, but people have been asking, so I thought it only polite to include it. And that's the introduction of the Rocket 3, which I'll cover towards the end of the video. Now, first of all, the Triumph Factory Custom Bobber. I had heard rumours earlier in the year that there was a new bobber under development, and this appears to be what that was. A bobber with upgraded suspension clad in some bits of carbon fibre. The upgraded suspension is very welcome because comfort on the bobber has been a bit of a sore point for a lot of customers, but it's only available with a TFC version of the bobber and with an eye-watering price tag of £15,500. I think what has really pushed the price of this bike up is of course the carbon fibre parts. And I've thought about this long and hard. For me personally, carbon fibre and a bobber just don't go. It perhaps does have a place on a one-off custom build, but not on a limited edition series build from the factory. For me, it just doesn't feel right. I stood and watched this bike at the stand for quite some time. Virtually no one paid any attention. It's a nice looking bike in its own right, but for me it just doesn't fit in with the Bonneville bobber ethos. There's something gone slightly wrong with it. I know other people will have different opinions, we're all different. All I can say is it's probably just as well that it's only a limited edition run. It's going to be an acquired taste for some people, and that hefty price tag is going to take some swallowing. Right, next up, the Bud Akins Special Edition Triumph Bonneville T100 and T120. Again, not an overwhelming response from the public, although some people were actually looking at them. And a couple of comments that I did hear was, who's Bud Akins? Bud Akins was, of course, a one-time motorcycle racer and Triumph dealer in the US. Befriended by Steve McQueen in the 1960s, the King of Cool asked Mr. Akins to do a few stunts for him in various films. And from there, an illustrious career as a stuntman became a new way of life for him. And Triumph have released these special edition bikes to celebrate his life. As I've said, it became quite obvious that some people didn't know who he was. He certainly wasn't a man who was as high profile a personality as Steve McQueen was. But I dare say that the licensing of his name is probably far cheaper than that the Steve McQueen estate charges. Basically, these bikes just consist of a red and white two-tone paint scheme, which is alarmingly similar to the Baker Express paint scheme used on some of the Interceptors for the last year or so. Triumph standard accessory LED indicators with a Bud Akins sticker on the side panel. That's about all you get for your extra £300. Other than that, as far as I could see, the bikes were stock, apart from the fact that you do lose those expensive tank badges in place of some stickers. I've no doubt that this bike is going to appeal to some people. It's certainly a very cheerful colour scheme, although it seemed obvious to me, being there in the crowd, that the relevance of this model may be lost on others. And last but certainly not least, Triumph's biggest news this year, the reintroduction of the Triumph Rocket 3R. Now, there hasn't been a rocket in Triumph's lineup since 2017 when it was discontinued because it was no longer a profitable model. The rocket actually has quite an interesting history. Triumph, as we know, trades heavily on its heritage, but the original rocket was in fact a 3-cylinder BSA, the BSA rocket. And back in the 1960s, with Triumph, BSA and Norton all living under the same roof, the BSA rocket was basically rebadged as a Triumph and called the Trident. Now, Triumph introduced the Trident in the mid-1990s as sort of a naked utility tourer. And in 1998, when they decided that a complete revamp of the model was required, the name was taken from the old BSA rocket and applied to the Triumph. Triumph were trying to produce a luxury tourer to compete with the likes of the Harley-Davidson Dynaglide and the Honda Goldwing. Now, originally it was intended to be a 1600cc machine, but Triumph allowed itself to be dragged into a gentleman's sausage measuring competition. Yamaha launched the Roadstar Warrior of 1670cc's and Honda launched the VTX 1800. So Triumph decided that it was going to be a 2.3 litre bike, just to make sure no one would catch them up. Initially aimed at the US market, it was unfortunately a bit of a failure. The bike didn't really fit into the niche that it was intended for, and it failed to carve out its own niche. Sales of this bike were never outstanding, but various revamps and refreshes eventually got it to the point where it was making a profit until it was axed in 2017. Now, there are two models in the lineup, the Rocket 3R and the Rocket 3 GT. Both feature a 2,458cc engine, an inline 3-cylinder water-cooled double overhead cam. Both pump out 165 brake horsepower at 6,000 revs, with a maximum torque figure of 221 Newton meters at 4,000 revs. These bikes are purely and simply an exercise in motorcycle excess, with an engine size and power output bigger than your average family car. Front suspension is by way of Showa 47mm upside down forks, with a fully adjustable Showa piggyback at the rear. Both feature Brembo 4-piston calipers front and rear, with a 750mm seat height, an 18-litre fuel capacity and a dry weight of 294 kilograms. Final drive is shaft via a BMW-esque single-sided swing arm. There's no doubt about it, it's a beautiful bike, but with prices starting at £19,500 and going well over the 20 grand mark, the price is as excessive as the performance. I am struggling a little bit to see what it actually is. It seems to be pitched as some sort of luxury tourer, but the tiny soft panniers and tank bag that Triumph are selling for this bike don't really fit into that. It might be okay for a long weekend bed and breakfasting, but you couldn't do much more than that with the capacity that the luggage gives you. The luggage itself does seem to be a bit of a tongue-in-cheek afterthought. I think the price tag is going to turn some insurance companies off, and if you buy one of these, you're certainly going to have some explaining to do to the wife. The positive thing is that Triumph have actually put their efforts into bringing something new and fresh to the market, rather than just rebadging and reimagining existing models. I hope the Rocket 3 does find its niche, although I'm not entirely sure what that niche is. Muscle bikes were a phenomenon of the 90s, a machine designed to inflate egos. I'm not entirely sure where that fits in 2020. Right, that's about all I've got time for this video. I will be doing at least one more video on the NEC because we can't finish without visiting the Norton stand. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back next week, as I say. So until then, ride safely, and I'll see you soon.